We're back. We're back. Once again, people, you know what? You know what we do on this, on the Red Chair? We bring you guys some very, very good conversations, some very open, very insightful in what people do, and most importantly, very educational. So this conversation, I believe, is going to be very educational. And
My name is Akua Ofosuhnen. I work full-time as a dressmaker, but I'm also an events organizer, African spiritual practices events around psychedelics, and I'm also psilocybin magic mushroom guide as well for people.
yeah, and how long have you been like on this journey for? Like, this.
It's now probably, one of those things I
Yeah.
would say maybe about 6, 7 years now
Okay.
altogether.
Altogether, okay. And I could imagine, I could imagine you going on this journey. You probably found out so many different things and whatnot. And for those people, like, even one of the things before we proper dive into it, I just wanted to just randomly ask you this question as well. Yeah. Why do you think? Why do you think some people like? Why do you think some people feel like they're not spiritual beings in general? Because the reason why I asked that, because I believe, you know, like every human being on this planet, you're a spiritual being. The only thing some people don't really do is to get to tap in, into their, obviously, to their higher self and do work on themselves. But for you personally, yeah, what do you think? Why do you think some people really don't think, oh, they're spiritual, or they don't believe they're spiritual beings? If you get where I'm coming from,
Yeah. I mean, I meet people who will say,
yeah,
for them they don't have a spiritual life, and it's quite an interesting prospect. I mean, I can't say why somebody else doesn't.
yes,
It's up to them, really. But I think we've all been brought up in a society that pushes science and kind of calls spirituality superstition. And I can understand that, because if you've never felt anything that you can't see,
yeah,
then what people are talking about will sound like lies. It's
yeah,
only really as you start to develop yourself and then you start to feel things that people can't see, or you see things that nobody else can see,
yeah.
then you start thinking,
Maybe I am spiritual.
exactly.
And let me do more work on this. Let me,
Exactly.
yeah, let me unlock this.
Yeah.
Like for you, when was the first time, like that first moment, like you said, sometimes people get to a point where it's like, oh, I feel something. Let me even do more research on this. Like for you, when was the first time you actually realized, you know what? I feel, yeah, within my soul, I feel something different. And let me just do some more research to tap into my inner self.
I mean, so my family, I suppose, a very spiritual family. So my mum's sister in Ghana was a very famous Christian healer. So we grew up kind of knowing about the works that Mami D4 could do. We knew that people could go and see her who didn't have children, and she would say, go forward and you will give birth to Hannah, Joseph,
Yeah.
and the children would be born in that sequence of the different sexes. Sick people would come, she would cure them, all sorts of things. So we grew up
Experiencing
with that. Yeah. My mum could have dreams that came true. So we were used to that. So different people in the family had different kind of gifts.
Yeah.
I think for me, I didn't really fully appreciate the gifts in our family until relatively recently, when my brother's gifts started to come. And he wasn't young, he was like about 40, 42, as a personal trainer in London. And then these gifts started to come through him. He started being able to see people's chakras. He can kind of get a read from your organs if somebody's sick, and all of this kind of stuff. So when his gifts started to come through, I became more curious about spirituality, and he would help us with meditation and things. And in that time was when my son found out from my uncle, one of my uncles we call Big Uncle, because he's 101. He's going to be 102
wow.
this year.
Big up, Big Uncle, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
More life, Big Uncle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my son would speak to Big Uncle quite a lot. And I remember my son coming back and saying to me, "Oh, Granddad on Mum's side, we always heard that he was a herbalist." He said, "No, he was more than a herbalist. He was an okomfo. Okomfo in my language is like a shaman.
Okay.
So he's somebody who goes into trance, who divines, who has spiritual contact with different entities or plants or rocks or water." So we went to see Big Uncle and got the story direct from him. And that's when it connected for me to, we used to have another relative who was my mum's cousin. She was the oldest woman in our village. And I remember years ago, she said to me, "Oh, our family, there's lots of Okomfo all the way into back in our ancestry. There's always been Okomfo." And she told us how there was a very famous Okomfo in Ghana called Okomfo Anoche. And she said that one of our ancestors was an Okomfo who was entrusted with a task by Okomfo Anoche about 450 years ago. So although I'd heard that story, I didn't know that the line was all the way down.
Goes as back as it did.
Exactly. And that every generation, people are born into the family with spiritual gifts. And what was interesting that I learned was that different people take it to different, if you like, religious paths. So there are some healers in our family, they're Muslims.
Yes.
Some are Christians, and some have stayed traditional African religion. And then some people, like my brother, are completely unaffiliated. They just have the gift.
The gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm from Uganda. Obviously, East Africa, Uganda, Kampala. Born in Kampala.
Right.
And what one of the things that I realized as well, obviously about where I come from as well, when I was growing up, like this word had a bad stigma, like voodoo.
Yes.
Like
yes.
what could you tell us about voodoo? And obviously, what do you know about voodoo? And obviously, like, what have you experienced in terms of that word voodoo?
Yeah, I mean, in the West, of course, voodoo and Ifa and all of the traditional African spiritual practices had to take on a negative connotation because of who came in to rule us. When you come in to rule a people, you can rule them physically, but you have to also rule them spiritually. In the British wars and colonial stories, if you look back, each time they would try and take a spiritual object from the people. From the Scottish people, you have a stone, I think it's called the Stone of Scone, something like that.
Yes.
And they actually have it underneath the royal chair in Westminster Abbey or something. And that used to be the stone that the Scottish kings were crowned upon. So when the English took over Scotland, they took that stone. And so forevermore it must live underneath the British throne. When they took over the Sikhs, they had a golden chair. That resides, I think, in the British Museum somewhere. When the British came to Ghana, the Asante people, we have a golden stool that is not sat upon. It's an object that they say houses the soul of all the Asante people.
I understand.
Yeah, and there was a very famous war in 1900 when the British demanded the golden stool of Asante.
Yeah.
So when you're colonizing a people, it's just as important to colonize their spirituality as it is their physicality. Yeah. So this is why all of the African spiritual systems had to be demonized.
Had to be demonized, and then obviously when now years and years and years later, like in terms of like voodoo, like that kind of like narration, that actual meaning got twisted in terms of like in terms of now people, when you say voodoo, like for a very, very long time, like I said, even though I was born in Uganda, growing up in this country, like the first thing that literally came to your mind, like when you're in school, whatever, voodoo is like witchcraft. And it's like, oh, that's bad, this and that.
Yeah, because, you know, the colonizers experienced a lot of hardship from our traditional priests and our traditional warriors. You know, when you look at Haiti and the war between the Haitians and the French, they always say that voodoo was one of the biggest instruments in that war, which is why out of all the different African systems, voodoo is the one people are most scared of. Because literally, it's the one that the white French people became very frightened of voodoo. Because of how emboldened it made the people. And the fact that when you have people with a very strong spiritual system, where, if you like, the priesthood is very, very strong, you've got people who are able to literally travel into the astral lands to see the future, to see the past, to see where, you know, the troops are hiding. So you need to demonize this so that the new generations of people are literally leaving. It's like going into war and leaving behind your shield. So you can still have a sword, but you can't protect yourself 100%.
True.
So it's a tool of colonialism to make people afraid of their traditional spiritual practices.
That's why I would say that's why it's important. Obviously, you know, I'm sure obviously other people out there speaking about it as well, but once again, like I said, that's why I think it's so important to even have these conversations, man, to educate people, right? Because for many years, like, people just thought, like, even going back to where we originally come from, you know, Africa, our countries, like for a lot of us who, you know, came here when we was young, grew up here in different obviously countries in Europe and whatnot. Like, for you, like, how important is it, do you think, how important is it for us, for all of us to, you know, like, at some point to go back home to where we originally came from and to really connect in terms of like where we come from, to understand who we really are? Like, how important is that, do you think?
I think it's important if you can manage it. You know, some people, because of money and things, they can't, you know, they can't manage it. But if you can, it is a really good thing to just know where your roots are, where your grandparents were born. You know, to connect with the land that created you, to connect with the water bodies, to see other people who look like you. There's definitely a level of comfort. I mean, I was born in the UK, but I lived in Ghana from the ages of 6 to 9, and then didn't get to go back to Ghana again until I was about 26, 27. And it was such an emotional experience. If I'd never gone back, I would never know, you know, but to go back and to feel this extra layer of comfort, that was the thing that really stood out to me, was just how comfortable I felt. I mean, a thing that really surprised me was growing up in the UK, I'd really sort of been given this idea of kind of like, you know, feminism in the UK and in the West meant that women were absolutely at the top of their game in terms of society. And then when I went to Ghana, I found that actually it was not unusual to find women businesswomen. The markets are like 98% women who are in all of the markets selling everything. Meeting a rich woman was not unusual. A woman holding court and talking and everybody laughing was not unusual. The queens are the kingmakers, you know. So it was kind of interesting because I think subconsciously I absorbed this idea that back in Africa, you know, only the man speaking is the only voice to be heard. Women have no voice. And I went back to Ghana and I actually felt more confident
as a woman
there. You know, I felt physically safer in my body. You know, to be out 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, going home from a club.
That's actually really interesting.
You know, I felt more comfortable. And then as I've got older, and now I'm kind of like, you know, anti-age, definitely when I'm in Ghana, the respect level has risen, and the ability to kind of be mother to everybody is, and that exists also outside of Ghana, because even in this country, I find in our communities, that's one of the most beautiful things for us as women, is actually the way in which I find people younger, boys and girls, will accept my authority as an older African woman. And it's really good because I found I've been in situations sometimes where, you've got young men being rowdy on the streets and
Yeah,
it
of
might
course.
turn into something.
Yeah.
And actually, in my auntie role, I can go forward and be like,
diffuse
hey, 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 hey.
Yeah. And diffuse the situation and be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So all of these things, I think I really learned them when I went back to Ghana. I was able to really inhabit that.
Yeah. And also like as time goes by, like does your soul ever tell you, or do you ever feel within your soul like, the older you get and that like maybe you'd like to move back home and live back home, or like you're good in this country and the way things are? Because sometimes people, like the older they get, they get to the point where it's like, you know what, I wanna go back home and spend the rest. Yeah, like do you ever feel like that?
I do.
Or,
I mean, I moved back to Ghana with my
before?
son. Yeah, when he was 8 years old.
Yes.
We moved back to Ghana. We were there for 5 years. And we only came back because my mother was ill, and we came back. Originally, it was only going to be for 3 months.
Yes.
But unfortunately, her operation went wrong and we ended up staying. Okay. And so it's now been 7 years. And so now I'm actually in the process of looking at, okay, what does going back look like for me this time round? And also I started opening my mind to maybe I should go to Jamaica, have a look at Jamaica.
Yeah, why not?
Because, I hear that Jamaica is like a cleaner version of Ghana. And there's so many Jamaicans in Ghana that I can feel the vibe is very, very similar.
Similar, yeah, that's the key word, yeah.
Yeah, so now my son is growing up, I kind of feel like there's more options.
That's
there's more I want to see, more places I definitely want to go.
Yeah.
But I think for me, probably at this moment in time, I don't see myself ending my life here. Okay. I see myself, I hope, working towards being able to end my life somewhere where I'm able to live more off the land, growing food, being closer to water
and nature and
so even in that way, in terms of being here, the longer I'm here, I'm even thinking of moving towards that even here, not just waiting until I go to Ghana and then doing that. I'd like to be able to
like somewhere like outside London where it's like, it's more quiet, there's more nature. If possible.
The thing is, I'm one of these people, I really love the city. I love the city, and then I like wild rural.
Okay.
So like the English countryside is not what does it for me.
Okay.
I like, like when I go to Wales, and sometimes
my first ever holiday in Wales.
Exactly.
Oh, so
and
beautiful.
somebody will take you to a stream somewhere, and you just think, for me, I think, I love it, a cottage over there, this running water, and
God bless Wales.
Wales, Scotland. Somehow I feel like the land is breathing when you go to these places. Yeah. So it's about trying to create what you want where you are. It's not so easy being in London because the daily grind to make enough money just to keep.
just to keep going, literally.
Yes.
Like growing up in London, you know what they say about London.